Nasty man with the electrodes.
Hello, I'm Aaron Garner from Emotional Intelligence Academy, and in this short video I want to explore the area of emotional facial expressions. This is one of the first areas you're going to start to look into when you get involved in the world of body language and behavior analysis. So what we're going to do is have a look a little bit at the history, then we're going to look at the faces in some detail. We'll put some links below to make sure that you've got some areas to explore once you finish the video, and we'll finish with a bit of a warning as well. One of the first names you'll come across when we explore the early research of facial expressions is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a naturalist who's more famous for his theories of evolution and the origin of the species. Now, he was one of the first people to say that the face of man was remarkably similar wherever he went when he sailed around the world on HMS Beagle. Another name you'll become familiar with is Duchenne de Boulogne. Now, Duchenne was a neurologist and he studied the face using electrodes to create the face on the people that he studied. As we move into more modern research, you'll find names from the mid-20th century such as Sylvan Tompkins, Dr. Paul Ekman and David Matsumoto start to bring in research into the facial expressions of emotion. Now, this research is actually being developed to help with artificial intelligence, facial recognition in various different sectors. And we're going to explore the key emotional facial expressions that have universal features in this video. The faces we'll look at are anger, disgust, surprise, fear, contempt, sadness, and happiness. So let's dive into those now. So let's look at our first face, the face of anger. As we can see, the brows are down. Now this could easily be confused with cognition, so you've got to be really careful when we're considering the brows. But what's happening here is we've got the eyes being opened widely underneath the brows down. So we have brows down, eyes wide, which creates a strange look. But we've also got some tightening of this lower eyelid, which gives us more of a glare of anger, which gives us this really strong appearance. Now, the other action we can see here is around the mouth, where we have this tightening of the mouth, this rolling in of the margin of the lips here. So if we put it together, we have the brows down, eyes wide, tightening, and then a rolling in of the margin of the lips. And this is a full facial expression of anger. Now, part of this face could be shown in a more subtle way. So maybe just part of the face being shown in the lips as I'm having a conversation, which might indicate I'm getting a bit annoyed with the conversation. So this is what we call a subtle expression. Also, all of the faces could be shown in a very short duration. So the facial expression becomes present on the face because the individual is feeling an emotion, such as anger. And then as they realize they're getting angry, they suppress the face. So it appears on the face and then is taken off the face very quick. And this can be as fast as half a second and is known as a micro expression. So you may be having a conversation and all of a sudden the facial expression will appear on the face and go very quick. This is what we call a micro expression. So we have a full face, a subtle expression, which could be part of the face or low intensity, or a very fast expression known as a micro expression. So why might we feel anger? Well, all of these expressions that we'll talk about have universal triggers. So each of us may feel anger when we are obstructed when we're trying to achieve our goals. So if I'm trying to get from point A to point B and somebody cuts across my path, then this will create anger and potentially we'll see this face. Also, if I want the world to be a particular way or I want people to behave in a particular way and that doesn't happen, again, I'm not achieving what I want for the world or for people around me. Therefore, I may feel anger because my goals are being obstructed. So the next face we'll look at is the emotional expression of disgust. As we can see here, the brows appear to be pulled down again. Now, this is predominantly because the nose is being wrinkled. So as the nose comes up, the inner portion of the brow will be pulled down. It's not as low as when we see the anger brows being pulled down though. So if you wrinkle your nose, you'll notice that this brow comes down. I can still pull it down further, but in this case, it's the action of this nose wrinkling that's causing the brow lower. Now, the eyes are not as wide here, so the eyes aren't being widened underneath those slightly lowered brows, and we don't have the tension underneath on the lower eyelids there. So it's predominantly this wrinkling of the nose. However, one of the more reliable muscles is this upper lip raise. So we had this action in combination with the nose wrinkle and then the upper lip raise. This is more reliable than this. If I'm sneezing, then we may see some of this nose wrinkling. But if I'm trying to suppress disgust, perhaps I'm at a dinner party and someone serves me something that I don't particularly like, but I don't want to be rude, maybe you'll see a subtle disgust lip coming up, just my upper lip as I look down at my food. And I say, that looks really delicious. Now, the trigger for disgust is offensive stimulus. So it can be something that's actually physically offensive, or it could be language. So perhaps somebody is using language that you find offensive. Perhaps somebody is wearing something that you find offensive. But offense is the main trigger that we're discussing when we talk about the emotion of disgust. Let's take a look at the face of surprise. Here we can see we've got arched eyebrows and some wrinkling across the top of the forehead here. Now, if I raise both the inner and outer portion of my eyebrows, so the inner portion and the outer portion, on my head you can clearly see there is some wrinkling around the top here, but it depends on the face we're looking at. So we have the brows raised up, then we have some widening of the eyes, and we have a relaxed jaw and the lips apart. So in combination we have eyebrows up, eyes wide, and relaxed jaw. And that's the face of surprise. Now, this is typically only on the face very briefly because it transitions very quickly to other emotions depending on what surprised us. So for example, maybe there was something sudden and unexpected, such as a surprise birthday party or a surprise present, at which point when the surprise happens, we show surprise, but then it moves to something else. So perhaps if we're surprised at a birthday party, we would have the surprise and then the happiness, because we're happy about the fact that the loved ones that we know are there with us. Or if we get a surprise present perhaps and we don't like the present, maybe we would go, oh, and then we look a bit disappointed or a bit confused. So this will be on the face very briefly. If it's held on the face for a long period of time, then there's a strong chance it's not being felt for that long. So we might have somebody that is trying to demonstrate that they are surprised when you're telling them a story, for example. You tell them a story about a holiday and something surprising happened and they're like, wow, oh wow, really, wow. That isn't felt surprise, that is just a communicated signal that they know the story you are telling is a surprising story. So similar to the face of surprise, we have the face of fear. Now we can see here again, we have these brows that are being raised. But in the case of these brows, they're slightly different because what's happening is the brows are being raised, much like surprise, but they're also being drawn together by the muscle up here. So they're coming up and coming together. Now this can cause a flattening of the brow or sometimes bringing the wrinkling that we had across the forehead more into the center of the brow. In this case, we also have wide eyes, often more wide in fear than in surprise. So we have the brows up, brows together, and wide eyes. And then the difference around the mouth also between surprise and fear here is that the mouth is stretched laterally. So it's being pulled towards the outside of the face, like this. Okay, so we have the brows up, pulled together, eyes wide, and stretched. And that's, again, the full facial expression of fear. Now you may see just part of this facial expression, again, in a more subtle sense, this twitching of the mouth, or maybe just an eye flash. If we see an eye flash, that could also be surprise, remember, because eyes widening are in both of those emotional facial expressions. So if we see this, we have to be a little bit careful, but that is the full macro expression. Now the universal trigger for fear is a threat of harm. Now that could be something psychologically threatening, or it could be something that's actually physically threatening. If somebody jumps out at you and screams in your face, you're most likely to do that kind of face. But it's also a signal to everybody else around us that there is some threat present. So if I see a threat over there and I'm talking to you, me doing this on my face would indicate to you that there's a problem behind you, and you wouldn't have to turn around and look to know that. Another facial expression that was added a little bit later, there was originally 6 of these basic emotions that had universality. One that was added a little bit later was that of contempt. Now, contempt is interesting because it's the only unilateral of the facial expressions, only on one side of the face. So as we can see here, it's a pull in of the corner of the lip. Now, it might also be just a raising of the upper lip on one side, like this, but it is unilateral in whatever way we see this. So it's the only one-sided, not more on one side than the other, but the only one-sided facial expression. So this lip corner pull. When it comes to the universal trigger, most of us will be triggered and feel contempt if something immoral is happening in front of us. So we all have our own moral code. And if somebody does something that we deem to be immoral in front of us, then we're likely to show contempt. So it could be that somebody is doing something, bullying somebody, or being violent towards somebody, or being rude to somebody. Now, if it goes below our moral code, we'll show contempt because we wouldn't do that. It's below our standards. However, we might also show contempt for various other reasons. You'll see contempt being shown perhaps when people think they're more intelligent than somebody else. So they feel contempt towards people that are ignorant or that don't dress the way that they think people should dress. So often you'll see this superiority, which is what contempt does. It puts you above the person that you're observing. You'll see this in various different contexts. Now, for this reason, you can look at the work of John Gottman in around 1999 when he did work on divorce, for example. And one of the key indicators of divorce in his 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse was contempt. Because if one partner within a relationship puts themselves above another, then that is a problem within a relationship because it's not an equal relationship at that point. This is the face of sadness. As we can see, there are 2 predominant areas of this face. In this case, we do have some brow movement upwards again, but only in the inner portion of the brows. So the inner portion of the brows are being raised. Now, if I just do that, that should look like I'm slightly sad. And if I bring the lip corners down, as we can see in the bottom here, without pushing my chin up, if I bring the lip corners down and my brow up, then it shows that sad expression. One of the other things you'll see when people are trying to feign sadness, and in particular children when they want something, will be the chin being pushed up. Now that's clever because it creates the same arch shape, so we still see this upturned U of the mouth, but it's not the same as the lip corners being pulled down. It's being forced by the chin being pushed up. Now, the universal trigger for sadness is loss, and in particular, loss of something that you value. Now, to extremes, that could be perhaps grief, when you lose a loved one when they pass away. But it could be an item. It could be a loss of reputation, a loss of self-esteem. So anytime we have a trigger around loss, then we might feel sadness, and this is the facial expression that we may see. And it could be the full facial expression again, or maybe just the inner brows raising up as we're talking to somebody. The final face we'll look at is the face of happiness. And we can clearly see that face here. There's a couple of areas, once again, something happening around the eyes and something around the mouth. Now, when we're talking about happiness, the first thing people discuss is the smile. So that's the lip corners being pulled up here to here. And we do that even in a social smile context. So we're not feeling happiness, but somebody says, "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, I'm fine, thank you very much." And that doesn't look too genuine. That's more of a social smile. When we see actual felt happiness, we're likely to get action around the eyes as well. So there's a donut of muscle around the eyes called the orbicularis oculi, and that pulls in around the eye and creates this potential wrinkling around the side, depending on the face. We have this crow's feet. On younger faces, perhaps you may not get too much wrinkling here, but we have the smile here, the mouth and the eyes. So we have this wrinkling here. So with this combination, it looks more like a felt or genuine smile. And the trigger for happiness is pleasure. So anything that is a pleasurable stimulus. Now think back to the surprise example we used of it's a surprise birthday party that then leads into our loved ones are here, it's a surprise birthday party, I love everybody here. Therefore, we have a pleasurable stimulus. So it would go to surprise to happiness. So I mentioned at the beginning of the video that we would have some kind of warning. So I want you to remember a few things. One is that context is everything. When we're observing these facial expressions, what's happening around? Because our faces are used for various different things. So just because somebody's eyes are wide or just because their eyebrows are raised doesn't necessarily mean they're feeling an emotion. And we'll come on to that in a moment. The complex emotions is interesting as well. We might have a mixture of emotions. So just because I'm in a happy context doesn't necessarily mean I'll only be feeling happiness. So a good example is somebody collecting an award at an award ceremony. Now that's a happy occasion. However, they may also be upset because somebody they want to be there to witness that receipt of the award isn't present. So we have this happiness, but then some element of sadness that that person isn't there to witness that. So we have this complex emotion happening which can confuse things in a facial point of view. So one of the other contexts is that faces are used for not just emotion, but we use them to display the fact that we're thinking, and we also use them to communicate. And I've done that a few times in this section. I use my eyebrows a lot. I use my hands a lot as well, but my eyebrows. So if I'm trying to communicate a point, I may raise my eyebrows and perhaps open my eyes wide. Or if I'm asking you to answer a question, so what do you think? I may do that. Now I'm not surprised. I'm using that as a communicative measure. Cognition and communication. Got to think of both of those things. Is that what's happening? Is that part of the context? In which case, we may not be looking at an emotional facial expression. They're used in different ways. And then the final thing to consider is, please don't be creepy. Don't look at people when you're in a restaurant, in a cafe, and stare at them. Don't do that when you're at a train station, airport. Please do not stare at people. It is creepy. So this is interesting information, but try to use it in a responsible way. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was a nice whistle-stop tour of emotional facial expressions. If you want more information, we've put some links below so that you can explore this area a little bit further if you wish. Take care.